Good morning. My name is Clara Fang, and I'm CCL's Higher Education Outreach Coordinator. Since 2016, I have been supporting students and educators in building political will for climate solutions through our program, Citizens Climate Higher Education. When I first started volunteering for CCL, there were very few young members and only one campus chapter that I knew of. Today, we have 30 campus chapters, over 40 student leaders, and 7 regional fellows. We have also had over 40 interns, 180 higher education allies, and 53 endorsements from college and university presidents for carbon pricing. At my first conference 3 years ago, we had about 10 students registered. We all got together for dinner that evening. At this conference, we have about 380 students. And while I'd love to invite you all to dinner, I don't think you will all fit at the table. But please join us for the Millennial Mixer this evening at 6 p.m. on the patio behind the restaurant. Young people are leading the fight on climate change. I am honored today to introduce Piper Christian, one of those fearless young leaders. While she was a high school student in Logan, Utah, Piper led the effort to pass a resolution through the Utah State Legislature, which recognized the impacts of climate change and encouraged emissions reductions. She has spoken on youth panels, organized Utah's first Youth Environmental Summit, and gave a TEDx talk on climate change communication. She currently serves on CCL's governing board of directors. Piper Christian is a rising sophomore at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, coincidentally where I also went for my master's in creative writing. All of you probably don't know this, but CCL has a ranking system of colleges and universities, and the University of Utah is ranked number 1. Please join me in welcoming Piper Christian.
Who in this room has experienced a time while volunteering with CCL where you have thought, this is it. Despite my best efforts, climate change is irreversible? I'm glad I'm not the only one. For those of you not raising your hands, I don't know if I should applaud you for your optimism or reprimand you for your dishonesty. But that aside, I think we can all agree that the business of reversing climate change is exhausting and often deeply demoralizing work. I'm often at a loss for words when trying to capture the weight of this burden. As I struggled to conceive how to articulate this load, strangely enough, my grandfather came to mind. This is my grandpa Carl. Carl, I am told, was a successful Chicago stockbroker, avid fisherman, embarrassingly proud father, and the life of the party. He was also an alcoholic. He died of cirrhosis of the liver at age 48. My mother tells me that as she watched alcohol corrode his career, relationships, and health, she was consumed by one dominant thought: I hate what you are doing because I love you so much. While I and many of you may have never lived with an alcoholic, we have all known the pain of loving someone who is self-destructive. It's infuriating. More so, it's heartbreaking. And as I thought about that particular quality of pain, I realized that that's exactly how I feel when I think about the human race's dependence upon fossil fuels. My generation is the child of an addict. We were born on a collision course constructed by our forefathers, and while you have promised us time and time again that you will break your addiction, with each relapse, the promises sound more hollow. Why is this addiction so painful to me? I hate what we're doing because I love us so much. Carl Sagan once beautifully captured humankind's relationship to the earth. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a speck of dust suspended in a sunbeam. I love that. I love us with every fiber of my being, and that is why our self-destruction is so acutely painful. But pain does not drive me to persist in these challenging times. Hope does. Paul Hawken, the New York Times bestselling author of Drawdown, once said, "What's missing when we talk about climate change is possibility. We must talk not only about what is probable, but what is possible." So when I first read the most recent IPCC report, which warned that we will exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming if we do not rapidly draw down our carbon emissions, I tried to look for the possibilities hidden in the oncoming crisis we face. In the next 12 years, we have the opportunity to reshape the course of human civilization. We have the opportunity to change our society so that our economy and our environment are not competing forces, but symbiotic organisms. In the next 12 years, as we work to address one of the greatest collective threats our species has ever faced, we have the opportunity to discover how much every single member of humanity has in common. In the next 12 years, I may become a mother. I don't want to look my child in the eyes and apologize for being yet another generation ensnared in addiction. I want to tell them a story of how I lived during the most crucial heartbeat of history, how we changed its course for the better. That is possibility. You may write off my optimism as youthful naivete, but seriously, I've lived for 19 years in the state of Utah. I'm quite cozy with cynicism when it comes to environmental progress. I found this picture to be a perfect depiction of the tenuous relationship between fossil fuels and the environment in my state. Here you can see Castlegate Coal Plant against the background of Utah's spectacular red rock. Talk about contradictions. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, in 2015 alone, my state emitted 63.5 million tons of CO2, over half of which came from coal-fired power plants like this one. Just walking distance from our capital, you'll find one of Utah's 5 oil refineries, which altogether process 200,000 barrels of crude oil per day. And currently, 90% of the energy Utahns use comes from fossil fuels. I'll admit, growing up in Utah, I often felt that I lived in the wrong place at the wrong time to be an environmental activist. I figured that in order to make any marked difference for the environment, I'd need to move to a more progressive state. And as many youth in the room may resonate with, I often felt I was too young to have any measurable impact. These beliefs began to change at the age of 16 when I had the opportunity to travel to Paris during the COP21 Climate Accords. As a junior correspondent for a Utah news station, I was tasked with reporting the events of the summit back to my home state. It was extraordinary to be in Paris during the most comprehensive climate negotiations in history. But I quickly encountered a problem. As a 16-year-old pseudo-journalist, I was not a good candidate for high-level press access. Shocking, I know. Much to my frustration, I was barred from interviewing anyone directly involved in the negotiations. I had traveled across the globe to bear witness to history in the making, and yet I felt more powerless than ever. But then something changed. I came to realize that COP21 was not simply a gathering of world leaders. During those 2 weeks of climate negotiations, over 40,000 people from all over the world flocked to the city to make their voices heard. They were teachers and doctors, scientists and songwriters, grandparents and elementary students, united in their passion for climate action. While the presidents and diplomats worked behind closed doors, it was these people who electrified the city with a sense of hope. Thus, in my novice journalist position, I took on a new project. I wanted to know how are ordinary people confronting environmental threats in meaningful ways. To answer this question, I interviewed dozens of strangers throughout the city. By the end of my project, the stories I gathered spanned 6 continents. Asher raised awareness about illegal poaching among over 1.5 million people by creating heart-wrenching art installations about the African ivory trade. Ali Mohammed traveled to Paris with a youth delegation to speak about the risk of heightened droughts and floods caused by climate change in his home country of Sudan. Melati convinced the governor of Bali to ban plastic bags when she was only 12 years old. These stories taught me that human ingenuity is not reserved for the elite. It comes from ordinary people finding solutions to everyday problems. It emerges when communities take action in the face of hopelessness. Not only was I struck by the magnitude of impact of these activists, but the fact that many of them were no older than myself. And suddenly it dawned on me, who am I to make myself small? My doubts and insecurities about my ability to bring about change were only doing a disservice to the people and state that I loved. So when I returned to Utah, rather than throw my arms up in defeat, I rolled up my sleeves and set to work. I knew I was going to need help. So with a small group of close friends, I revamped our high school environmental club. We agreed that air pollution was the foremost environmental problem in our community. On the left is my hometown on a clear day. On the right is my community on what we call red air days. Logan, Utah has been ranked among the top 10 worst cities in the country for short-term air pollution. To address this issue, we introduced a resolution to our city council supporting policy and activities which address air quality and climate change. A CCL volunteer from our local chapter helped us draft the language. At the city council meeting, our club members shared personal stories about how the pollution affects our lives as teenagers. We were told we would be lucky to get a 3-2 decision in favor of our resolution. Shockingly, our resolution passed unanimously. We had taken a leap and landed on our feet. I remember after the council meeting, as we celebrated outside of our city hall, a friend of mine said, "Imagine if we passed a climate resolution through our state legislature." It sounded like such a pipe dream, but caught up in the thrill of the moment, I told him, "Perhaps we will." We approached other city councils around our state, urging them to pass their own resolutions for cleaner air and a healthy climate. Several city councils were receptive. For example, the Moab City Council passed a resolution that committed to being carbon neutral by 2032. It was during this early frenzy of climate activism in my sophomore year that my dad invited me to my first Citizens Climate Lobby conference in Salt Lake City. Hearing Mark Reynolds speak, I immediately felt a kinship with the organization. That summer, I attended my first CCL conference in Washington, D.C. I met students from every corner of the country, many of whom were spearheading marvelous initiatives within their communities. And in our lobby meetings, my young age was not viewed as a barrier, but an asset. Tense Congress members and legislative staffers would soften when I and other young lobbyists spoke. Regina Pistilli, a fellow CCL volunteer, beautifully captured the power of youth in this organization. You are the future, so your voice carries particular weight. But the most valuable thing I took from my first conference were the partnerships I developed with activists from my own state. These people would become my closest mentors and friends during our next big challenge. In 2010, the Utah State Legislature codified flagrant climate denial in the form of a resolution. The resolution urged the United States Environmental Protection Agency to cease its carbon dioxide reduction programs until global warming science had been substantiated. It gets worse. Among its declarations, it stated, climate alarmist global warming hypothesis is unable to account for the current downturn in global temperatures. It went on to warn that global governance related to reduction of CO2 would ultimately lock billions of human beings into long-term poverty. This resolution was passed through our legislature with overwhelming support. As students, we believed that this public dismissal of climate science endangered our future. We wanted to set the record straight, so we drafted our own climate resolution. Our resolution recognized the adverse effects of climate change and expressed the need for fact-based stewardship of the economy and the environment. Furthermore, it acknowledged Utah's commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve air quality, and expressed commitment to address the causes and effects of climate change. At the start of the 2017 legislative session, we brought a draft of our resolution with great enthusiasm to the state capitol in hopes of finding a sponsor. Polite dismissal was the dominant reaction to our requests. Many flat out denied that climate change posed any threat. Others agreed with our resolution, but warned that such progressive legislation would go nowhere in our conservative legislature. We'd gotten a lot of pats on the back, but no one took us seriously. Then we met the self-proclaimed senator of last resorts, Jim DeBacchus. Standing well over 6 feet tall, DeBacchus has a presence that is hard to ignore. With a long history of challenging the status quo in the Utah legislature, he offered to sponsor our bill after only a few minutes of discussion. We were dumbfounded and overjoyed. Unfortunately, our jubilation was short-lived. Our resolution's first stop was in the Senate Natural Resources Committee. The committee chair placed a hold on our resolution, which would not be lifted unless we removed the words, climate change. This meant that our resolution not only didn't stand a chance at a favorable vote, but it would never even be discussed. We emailed and called the chair numerous times, urging her to simply give us students the opportunity to testify, but our pleas fell on deaf ears. We had come too far to let such political tactics silence the voices of youth. If we wouldn't be granted an official committee hearing, we would organize our own hearing. We booked the largest conference room in the state capitol and released a call to action to students across the state, urging them to testify in favor of our resolution. The morning of the student hearing, I arrived at my school to find a busload of Logan High Grizzlies ready to storm the Capitol. I had no idea that so many students even cared. And when we arrived at the Capitol, I was even more dumbstruck. The conference room was standing room only, and over 100 students, from elementary school to college, packed the room. Sympathetic legislators and numerous news organizations attended to hear us speak. If you still question if we are capable of creating a just and sustainable future, you should have heard the students in that room. They spoke about thousands of megawatt hours of solar and wind potential across our state, and the jobs that could be created by transitioning to renewables. They spoke about Utah's dwindling snowpack and shrinking water supply as a result of steadily warming temperatures. They shared poignant perspectives of how their cultural and religious backgrounds commanded them to be stewards of the earth, as Navajo, Mormon, and Muslim students. I'd like to share with you the statement of my friend Josh Velasquez, who was only a sophomore in high school when he testified. He stated, "I firmly believe that the passing of this resolution will act as a platform for youth empowerment. This youth-led initiative is physical proof that young people have a voice, that change is possible through us, and that we can have an impact." While this image of Josh is a bit blurry, I love it because you can see a 7-year-old student on his right and a college student on his left, both of whom testified as well. Our hearing sent ripples across the state. Footage of the student testimonies gained over 15,000 views on Facebook Live, and news organizations throughout Utah spread the story of the students who stormed the Hill. But the greatest result of our mock hearing was something that none of us could have anticipated. Many legislators attended our hearing in support. 2 of these legislators were Democratic Representative Joel Briscoe and Republican Representative Becky Edwards. They were so moved by the words of us students, they approached us after the hearing with an exciting proposition. While our resolution was blocked in the Senate, they could co-sponsor it in the House. This did more than give our resolution a second chance at an official hearing. It demonstrated that taking action on climate change could transcend partisan divisions, and that we can work toward solutions not as Republicans or Democrats, but as concerned citizens with a common cause. A few weeks later, we were at last granted a hearing in the House committee. I wish I could tell you that our resolution gained a favorable vote, that our victory was easy and our journey was over. But in reality, our bill was 1 vote short of passing out of committee, and we could go no further during the legislative session. I also wish I could tell you that I'm a bottomless reservoir of optimism, that I rallied my peers to forge onward and not give up. In truth, this latest defeat knocked the wind out of me. I was tired of the cycle of victories and disappointments. We'd made an awful lot of noise in Utah politics and started a conversation on climate change, but at this point in the process, I was ready to abandon our efforts. A lot of adults ask me how they can engage youth in environmental initiatives. And in response, I would say, look to the leadership of Utah Citizens Climate Lobby volunteers. Because it was at this low point in our journey that they reached out to us students and said, "Don't you dare give up." What you've accomplished thus far is remarkable, but what you are capable of accomplishing if you persist is even greater. Once CCL volunteers committed to helping us, the scope of our network and capabilities grew by tenfold. So we committed to reintroducing our climate resolution in the next legislative session. But in order for it to have a shadow of a chance of passing, we realized we were going to have to transform our strategy. Lucky for us, Citizens Climate Lobby has already written the playbook on how to win hearts and change minds in politics. Many of you are familiar with what CCL calls the levers of political will. These are the core activities that all CCL chapters leverage to bring citizens into the political process and to ensure that their contribution is constructive. The first lever we pulled was grassroots outreach, or the effort to recruit and educate the public on climate solutions, citizen advocacy, and how to participate in one's government. It's the effort that us students became most engaged in. So first, the students who introduced the resolution led the Utah People's Climate March that May. Thousands of feet marched the streets of Salt Lake City, and voices rose in unison with the songs of climate justice. When we arrived at the governor's mansion, we addressed the crowd with, again, great enthusiasm, and gripped in our hands was an enormous painted banner of our resolution. That fall, we organized Utah's first Youth Environmental Summit, in which a diverse group of students from 15 schools across the state convened for a weekend to gain the skills and network to be effective young activists and lobbyists. We were building a well-informed and fired-up youth coalition. We knew, though, that grassroots outreach was necessary but insufficient. We had learned that from the barriers we'd encountered during the previous year's efforts. So behind the scenes, our volunteers were pulling a second lever of political will, grass tops outreach, which is the effort to educate, build partnerships with, and gain the support of community leaders and non-governmental organizations. The first partnership we built was with Heal Utah and Action Utah, two NGOs with a strong record of building good relationships with Utah legislators. They took on the task of editing the language of our resolution. We switched words like climate change to a changing climate, and sustainability to earth stewardship. Such changes may sound silly, but we realized that with these slight adjustments to our phrasing, we could have the exact same conversations about climate change, but without the divisiveness that barricaded us previously. Thank you. We also knew we needed to find a new messenger. If we truly were going to connect with these legislators, they needed to hear our message from a trusted source. We were extraordinarily fortunate to gain the support of Republican Representative Becky Edwards, who was willing to sponsor our resolution for the second year in a row. Going out on a limb to support us could be seen as a politically risky move for her, and I think it's important that you hear why the representative was willing to take that risk.
I had months of witnesses of seeing these students, and also the CCL people and the people on our team I'd seen their conversations, I'd seen their interactions with people, and I had developed trust of them. These students knew they were knowledgeable, but they also were incredibly polite, they were incredibly understanding, and I never heard them say, oh, Representative, he's just a crazy old loon. He's just so frustrating. I mean, we all know the things that we could say about people that are like that, but I never heard them ever say any. It was an amazing, and I don't think it was just self-restraint. I think it was belief in an approach that was incredibly effective.
We recognize that Representative Edwards could not be the sole conservative messenger for our bill. We needed a wide array of community and business leaders that were trusted by conservatives to endorse our work. We approached entrepreneurs and executives across the state and compiled an endorsement letter which over 15 businesses signed on to. It was now time to get our resolution in front of legislators. We organized an event at the Capitol. Apologies for the delay. We organized an event at the Capitol in which a panel of leaders in science, energy, education, and policy spoke about our climate solutions. Former Congressional Representative Mia Love, who was one of the early co-signers of the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus, gave a virtual statement about why she supported climate solutions. After the presentation, over 30 students had discussions with the legislators to share their thoughts and gather input for our resolution. Our grassroots and grasstops efforts generated a good reputation among the community, an excellent rapport and credibility among our legislators. But it was time to pull a final lever of political will: citizen lobbying. Tom Moyer, CCL's coordinator for our state, identified volunteers in nearly every state House and Senate district throughout Utah. These volunteers built relationships with their state representatives and promoted our resolution. Students played a central role in these lobbying efforts. We wrote emails, made phone calls, attended town halls, published op-eds, spread the word on social media, and testified during hearings. One Republican legislator told us, "I will vote for your resolution if you please stop contacting me," which we saw as a victory. Our resolution passed through the Rules Committee, then the House Natural Resources Committee, then the House floor. At last, it arrived at the dreaded Senate Natural Resources Committee, where 1 year prior, it had been stopped dead in its tracks. We testified knowing that the odds were against us. My friend Wes stood before the chair and declared, "We live in a rapidly changing world, and this forward-thinking resolution allows us to effectively adapt in a way that benefits all." The resolution was put to a vote. It passed unanimously. At last, our bill made it to the Senate floor of our state legislature. We knew we had the support we needed, but as the session was drawing to a close, we were now racing against time. Our state constitution mandates that voting must stop at midnight, the last night of the session, yet there were still over 150 bills on the docket to be voted upon. If our bill wasn't prioritized, it could die inches away from victory. On the last day of the session, we students peeked at our phones in class every few minutes to track our resolution in the lineup. It may have been the first time in history high schoolers were glued to C-SPAN. And at last, the fateful moment we'd been all waiting for. At 7:30 that evening, our resolution passed through the Senate with overwhelming support. We were the first red state in the country to pass a factually sound resolution on climate change. It would later be signed by Governor Gary Herbert with the students who started this whole journey at his side. What does this accomplishment mean for the state of Utah? After all, many have retorted, a resolution is nothing but a lofty statement. It doesn't carry any political weight. But in a state where fossil fuel addiction still reigns supreme, our philosophy was quite simple. The first step is admitting you have a problem. We took that first step, and in doing so, we not only made it possible to talk about climate change in our state legislature, but we started conversations on bipartisan climate solutions nationwide. I celebrated alongside my friends as we received recognition from some of our own political and environmental heroes. A few weeks after our resolution passed, we had the opportunity to meet Dr. Jane Goodall, who congratulated us for our hard work and success. Articles on our success were published by CNN, The Hill, High Country News, and the Yale Center for Climate Solutions, which broadcast our story to over 370 radio stations nationwide. But my favorite article about our resolution was actually one published in the Salt Lake Tribune. In August of 2018, 16 mayors from throughout Utah co-published the op-ed, "When it comes to climate solutions, there's nothing like what Utah can offer." In the article, they stated, "If Utah surprised the rest of the country by our ability to transcend politics and adopt this resolution, we are excited to see the reactions as we act on those intentions." I love that statement because it captured the mission of everyone involved in this initiative. We never viewed our resolution as an end goal. We saw it as a beginning. By starting a conversation on climate change, we hope to open the door for greater tangible environmental policies in our state. And in the year that followed, it was clear that we did. In the next legislative session, we witnessed some extraordinary bills pass and get introduced. One bill committed to the development of renewable energy production in rural areas in our state. Utah's utility provider is now seeking to expand renewable energy production sufficient to power 34,000 homes. And remember how Representatives Briscoe and Edwards co-sponsored our resolution in the 2017 legislative session? Those two went on to co-sponsor HB 403, the first ever bipartisan state carbon pricing bill in the country. It's a radical proposition, but I believe our work in Utah serves as a litmus test for the work we're doing at the national level in CCL. While our goals may have been different, our methods were quite similar. Not only did we use the same levers of political will that CCL utilizes regularly, but we acted on the same core values and principles. We didn't demonize those who opposed our efforts. We asked them for their input and searched for mutual ground. We believed that ordinary citizens, not career lobbyists, are the most qualified to push the needle in politics. And we believed in perseverance, in countless meetings, endless emails and phone calls and op-eds that sent our elected officials a clear message. You can dismiss us, you can reject us, but you can't keep us from coming back. Just as these measures produce success in one of the most conservative states in the country, I believe they will likewise produce success in passing the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act through Congress. I am proud of the progress that Utah has made. I am also cognizant of the fact that my state and our country remain fossil fuel addicts. A long path to recovery still lies ahead. My grandfather Carl lost his battle with addiction, but there are countless others who have, despite all odds, achieved lasting sobriety. They didn't do it overnight, and they didn't do it alone. Ask a recovered addict to share their story, and they probably won't tell you that quitting was convenient. They will more likely tell you, if it weren't for a teacher, a parent, a community, a program, a personal hero, or a friend who helped me persevere, I wouldn't be where I am today. So how do we beat our fossil fuel addiction? Persistence and partnership. It takes dogged personal commitment and an army of people alongside us who, through each momentous triumph and crushing setback, believe that we can overcome. Thank you.
Piper, we have time for a few questions from the audience.
Okay.
First, what would you say to CCL groups who want more youth in their chapter but aren't sure the best way to attract them and get them to stay?
I think the most critical thing for involving young people is finding a youth messenger. And so we talked a lot about this in our regional breakout session yesterday. The importance of finding a youth and a young person who's willing to go into high schools or colleges and speak about CCL and bring them in through that method. I'm particularly proud in my state of 2 volunteers, Shadrach and Angelo, who are college students and who traveled this May across our state and spoke to high school students, even in rural coal communities, about Citizens Climate Lobby. So I think finding those youth messengers is really key.
Thanks. Have you had reactions from federal legislations to your work at the state level?
What I can say is that when we go into our lobby meetings, we make sure, when we're speaking to Utah legislators, we make sure to talk about our Utah resolution because it's a way of demonstrating state support. And while I omitted it in my presentation, we had a few big Bernie fans in our group, and we were pretty stoked to get a shout out on Facebook from Bernie Sanders congratulating us for our work.
Piper, what kind of venues or places should we recruit students from?
I think the easiest answer would be high schools and colleges, particularly environmental science classrooms. And on my college campus, University of Utah, what worked really well was speaking to my global climate change class. They'd given a presentation the last day of the seminar about really all of the most depressing facts about climate change, and the room just physically deflated. So I pleaded my professor to let me come to the front of the room, and I said, hey, we're going to have a solutions seminar. We're going to talk about a bill that's going to try to reduce carbon emissions by 40% within the first 12 years. And it was like, everyone was like, okay, I'm all about that. And we had an amazing turnout. So I think college students and high school students speaking to those classrooms is really critical.
All right, thank you so much, Piper. Let's give her another round of applause.
Please welcome Ashley Hunt Martirano.
Luckily, I don't have to say anything interesting. I just have to say some things that are important for you to know about the rest of your day, because I don't know how to follow that. So I hope that you all had a great day yesterday and a great morning, and you're excited for some amazing sessions this afternoon. So I want to take a moment to talk about what to expect for the rest of the day. So turn to page 10 of your program. That's our schedule for today, and we have everything broken out there for you. So we're going to go to lunch at noon, so in just a few minutes. And we ask that all of you be back by 1:30 in your seats in the breakout session that you've chosen, because we're CCL and we start on time. The breakout titles and locations are listed on page 11, and the descriptions are on pages 14 through 16. So maybe while you're at lunch, skim through some of those titles and plan out your afternoon. The first breakout is at 1:30 for 1 hour. You'll have 15 minutes to change rooms. The second one is also an hour with 15 minutes between it and the final breakout. So from 4 to 5 will be your third breakout session. We'll end on time at 5 o'clock, and then we will invite you back here at 5:15 in the Regency Ballroom to hear from Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali as our closing keynote speaker. He is the Vice President for Environmental Justice, Climate, and Community at the National Wildlife Federation. You do not want to miss what he has to share with us. Then you'll be off to dinner on your own at 6 p.m. So if you're a meeting leader tomorrow, raise your hand. Awesome. You guys are going to have a great day. I'm very excited for what you're going to experience, especially if this is your first time lobbying. So meeting leads, this message is for you. We want you to pick up the folder of constituent letters for each meeting that you're in charge of. And we want you to do that today between noon and 5 p.m. So that means that before you come back here to Regency for Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali's talk at 5:15, you should have already picked up your folder of constituent letters to take to your meetings tomorrow. At 6 p.m. after his talk, you'll head to dinner. And then tonight, we invite you from 8 to 11 if you want to cut the dance floor with us. We will have some music and cash bar. And that will be in Empire, which is that room that's a little hard to find down the stairs by the fitness center. You'll find Lene doing salsa there. You'll find Tony and his partner Rachel swing dancing, and that's where Danny will be judging the dance off. He does not get to participate because we don't let professionals participate in an amateur sport. So tomorrow, lobbying, arrive at 8 a.m. in front of the Capitol, by 8 a.m. in front of the Capitol for a group photo. We're going to be taking that exactly at 8:15. You do not want to miss that. And good news, the weather is looking promising for tomorrow. So after that, you're going to head off to your lobby meetings. If you don't have any lobby meetings, or if you don't have any at that moment in time, we want you to go around to the other side of the Capitol with us and participate in our Hometown to the House event. So that runs until noon tomorrow. Then the reception will be in here in Regency from 7 to 11. We'll have light hors d'oeuvres and a cash bar. And then it'll be a great opportunity to connect with your fellow volunteers to share how your day went. Save the date, November 11th and 12th is Congressional Education Day. It's in your program. Just letting you know to put that on your calendar. So I started with social media yesterday. I'll end with that as well. Tomorrow is Tweet Congress Day. We have information on page 4 of your program about this. So if you have a Twitter account, please participate. If you don't, ask a friend or a family member to participate by tweeting your members of Congress about how many people are on Capitol Hill tomorrow. Tweet a picture of your group with your member of Congress meeting, maybe some of your fellow volunteers preparing for your meeting. If you're attending the Hometown to the House event, there'll be a location you can record a video message, and you can then tweet that out to your members of Congress. And you can tag them in it so that they know that you're here, that you support climate action. One last thing, the conference presentations that we've been recording are available on Community. So those are set up and we're providing access to all of them for you. So you can take a picture of this, short URL, and you can also find the recordings by clicking on Resources and Training in the top menu and then scrolling to Conference Presentations on CCL Community. You'll see external links to all of the presentations already uploaded on Google Slides, the Facebook live streams we've been doing, and our CCL YouTube channel, where all recorded panels will be uploaded by the targeted date of Friday. So I just want to say thank you all for being here and for giving me another dose of optimism and hope. And Mark's going to say a couple things.
Wow. Piper Christian, right? Holy cow. Yeah, we have a day and a half staff retreat at the end of this in November, and we always reflect on favorite moments, and I think it's going to be 35 people saying Piper Christian. Yesterday, one of the slides you probably saw was that we work in 88 countries around the world, and we have one staff member who manages that, Kathy Orlando. So, yeah. So fortunately, some of our partners from around the world were able to make it to the conference this year, and they and Kathy are going to join us up on the stage, and Kathy will introduce some of our friends from around the world. So can you all come up? Yeah. One side, oh, this side.
thanks for giving them so much love. I love them too. So if you don't know, I'm Canadian. And thanks, Mark, for the wonderful introduction. I work as the International Outreach Manager alongside Joe Robertson, our Global Outreach Director. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce these people. Please refrain from clapping until the very end. First is Edgardo Solorzano. That's lovely, okay. CCL Honduras is one of our newest Latin American countries to join. They are a small, impressive group of professionals from a variety of fields, and they are reviewing their government's policies and seeing how they can fit carbon fee and dividend into that. And they're currently planning to meet with their environmental secretary and their federal environmental prosecutor. Laura, no, thank you though. So Laura Morales from, there she is, from Colombia. She started CCL Colombia a year and a half ago. She was one of the first new people we brought on board. And it was awesome. Like, I've got this new job, and I've got this person assertively whispering into presidential candidates' ears during the Colombian election in November 2017 to make sure they kept carbon pricing on their policy platforms, and she succeeded. Yes, using the CCL way of appreciation and respect. And now CCL Colombia is working with other like-minded organizations to strengthen Colombia's carbon price and make it revenue neutral. Jorge Martinez and Mauricio Castillo, they are from Mexico, where there also is a small carbon price. And CCL Mexico has received positive endorsements for their carbon fee and dividend from local municipalities. And they are in the process of scheduling meetings with their secretaries of the environment and energy. And they're young, so of course they've been involved in Fridays for the Future, and they brought carbon fee and dividend into the zeitgeist of the Fridays for Future movement in Mexico, which is awesome. So they're bringing that to Mexico's Fridays for Future. Angelica Rodriguez. Pardon? Angelica Flores, sorry. She's from CCL Chile and has directly advised a senator on tax reform that included making their carbon tax stronger, and they are also advising two members of the Chilean Congress on carbon pricing, so they're direct advisors. And this is a big year for Chile. They will be hosting the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the international negotiations, or as we in the world call COP25. So it's a very big year for Chile. And lastly, CCL Chile is very excited to be working on an all-party climate solutions caucus like you have here in the United States. We certainly learn from one another. Tammy Kellogg, she's from Panama, and during the Pope's visit to Panama, there was CCL shared our main message of positivism, price carbon, and talk to your politicians to tens of thousands of youth using artistic means. And they attracted youth to CCL, and those youth directly lobbied 3 legislative candidates during the election for carbon fee and dividend. As well, CCL Panama is just on the verge of having their first conference and lobbying days as well this August. Yes, this is exciting. And Tammy coordinates CCL Latin America with ISATIS. There we go. And ISATIS is from Puerto Rico, and together they have carefully layered, beautiful relationships across Latin America. And don't be surprised if Latin America gets carbon tax fever in a big way in the next year because of their work. David Michael Terangua. He's been with us since 2015. This year has been so exciting. We've activated 5 groups in Nigeria. Wow, yeah. If you didn't know it, Nigeria has an economy the size of Russia and over 200 million people. He's also, just briefly, he's also wrote a grant to get internally displaced people in Nigeria solar energy, and they're training people on the ground how to build solar energy in Nigeria, because a side project of David's. And not only does he do that, he helps empower leaders in 18 other countries across the continent of Africa. Then there's James. James Collis is from Portugal. If you talk to him, he's also from England. The European group has decided that they are going to work at the European Union level. Yeah, and they are working carefully within a process called the Citizens Climate Initiative, and they've been offered an opportunity to bring carbon fee and dividend up to the European Parliament through a process called the Citizens Climate Initiative, which we'll be developing over the next year. This has been intricate work, and I largely applaud the work of James and the group at CCL Europe. There's going to be a couple people I miss because they're on stage, but welcome from France. And yes, I think that's it. But lastly, if you're Canadian, Marlo, no. Lastly, if you're Canadian, can you please stand up? Okay. Okay. So Marlo joined CCL Canada in 2015. In 2017, he volunteered to facilitate the creation of the monthly action sheets at Citizens Climate Lobby Canada, which we do as a collective. So he gathers the information from everybody, and then together, a small group of us every month coalesce and make these action sheets, and it's just been so beautiful working with them. That's just one of the things he does, and he does it as a volunteer. This unconditional giving of people like Marlo and all these people on the stage and all of you is why I'm still standing and ready to do more. So thank you for all that you do, and all that you do, and all that you do. I love you. Thank you. I can't see out there. Woo! Thank you. Okay. Good. Okay.
So that was really cool, and also welcome Sidone from France. So nice to have you here also. Thank you. All right, everybody, have a great lunch. We'll see you back here at the start of the breakout sessions at 1:30. Thanks, everybody.